Hey guys, back with the engine. We have it back from the machine shop. If you come over here, Nina, we can show everybody what we had done. So I've got the valve sitting in here. We installed new valve guides last time, and because of those new valve guidance being installed, we had to recut the seats for all of our valves. And as you can see, we have nice bouncy valves, and that's a good thing. You know, there's all these little tricks that you can do to kind of make sure things are done right. Of course, you know, we want to measure things and do it the right way, but there's also other little tricks of the trade, you know, and one of them is if you have a decent valve seat and a decent seal, your valves will typically pop a little bit when you see how that bounces a little bit in the seat. That's a pretty good indication that you've got some good valve seats cut. So, of course, the real way would be to pull a vacuum on them. I'm not going to do that right now for this video, because what I plan on doing is showing you how to clean up and chase the threads on some of these, you know, various drilled and tapped holes for, you know, the accessories and things like that. So I'm going to pull these valves out real quick, and I'm going to show you how I do that. I don't know that there's a right way or a wrong way, but there's a way that I do it that's always worked for me. So, and what I'm talking about is, over the years, you can see these happen to be the studs for the intake and exhaust manifold, and over the years they rust up and the threads get kind of gnarly. And when you're putting this whole thing back together, it's nice to have, you know, just clean threads that, you know, bolts you can spin them on with one hand. It's just so much nicer putting these things back together when they're brand new, just like they were from the factory. And the way you do that is you chase these threads out with taps and with dies. So let me give you an example of that on this motor, and I'll show you how I like to do it. I've already done some of these. You know, this is a little 1/4-inch hole here that's threaded and tapped. I'm not sure what mounts there. My memory's not serving me. But you got the motor mounts and things like that. And if you zoom in here real good, Nina, you can kind of see, and I'll get a flashlight too, so we can hopefully kind of help show that. One second while I grab my flashlight. So if you look at these threads, they're nice and clean right here. So those threads are all nice and clean. These the same over here. Those are ready to have bolts installed into them, and in that case, I think it's the motor mounts and things like that. But I've got a couple that I haven't done yet that are still pretty rusted, and I kind of want to show you the process I use to clean those. So I'm gonna rotate this block just a little bit so that we have a little bit better access to them. And what I'm talking about is the same holes over on this side. You know, if you come in here and take a look, you'll see some of these aren't too bad, but they're fairly rusted. They've had, you know, years of service on them. All of these little holes, 1/4-inch holes, you can see there's some pretty good rust in this one here. And what we're going to do is we're going to run a tap through those. I like to start the tap dry with no oil on it or anything like that. But the first step I do is I take you know, something that I can fit in there to kind of clean those holes out in case there's any grease or anything in them. So this is kind of the first step. You know, these big ones are pretty clean, and these are pointed down too. So obviously something that's pointed down is not going to collect a lot of grease. But right here, you know, these are pretty rusted up, and you hope that they're fine. This one's pretty gnarly, but you know, we'll run the tap through there and see if we can't get it cleaned up and make sure everything's straight and lubricated, and make sure these work pretty good. So as I said, in this case, these smaller holes are 1/4-inch 20, so these are all coarse thread, and this is 1/4 20 thread. And like I said, the first thing I like to do is just go ahead and run the tap in dry. And I know there's probably some people cringing, because like, why would you put a tap in dry on threads? And I understand that, and this is actually not the right tap for that size. That's fine. We'll have to potentially go up one more on that one. But at any rate, the reason you do that, in my opinion, is because I really want to knock that rust off first. And in order to do that, there we go. In order to do that, if I send the tap in dry, that really does a good job of clearing the threads. So we're going in with the tap dry right now, and you know, one important distinction on taps is there's all different kinds of taps. In this case, I'm using a tapered thread cutting tap, and traditionally, you know, that would be used for actually cutting nice new threads in a nominally drilled hole. In this case, we're just using it to chase threads in an existing hole. This actually is not the perfect tool for this. Typically, what you would be using is a thread chaser tap, and if this was a spark plug or a, you know, connecting rod hole or a main bearing cap hole, I would definitely be using a thread chaser. A thread chaser's tap is a little bit different, a little bit less aggressive. It's made to reestablish existing threads, whereas this is made to cut new threads. So not the perfect tool for this, but these aren't really like load or vibration critical threads. So this will be just fine. A lot of people have been using just the regular thread cutting taps to chase threads. But basically what I'm doing is I'm running these through and getting all that old rust out of there. And you can see, you know, there's a little bit of resistance on this. I wouldn't say that I'm cutting new threads, but I'm definitely removing some rust, and you can see it on the tap when I pull it out. This just happens to be a set of Matco tap and dies. Anything will work. You know, you can spend as much as you want, and you can buy a nice big set, which is kind of handy. But you can see the rust that's coming out of these holes. So, like I said, I like to run the tap dry first on these existing holes, and then once I run the tap through once, I go ahead and run some brake cleaner up there and get all the debris out, and kind of run the tap in with some oil. And the only reason I put oil on it, a lot of people think, well, you know, you put oil on a tap to, you know, because you're cutting threads and you want lubrication. I'm not putting oil on this because I'm cutting threads. I'm putting oil on it because I just want to get oil up in there around the threads, because we've removed all the rust now and those threads are all cleaned up. I don't want them rusting back up on me. You know, even though this engine's probably going to be put together and running here shortly, it's not, you know, it's nice to have those clean threads on there. So you just saw me complete kind of the first step, which is running the tap in with no oil on it, just to get the rust kind of knocked off and the threads reestablished. And you can see this one goes a little deeper. You know, always be careful with a tap, because if you break a tap off in a hole, that's a very tough thing to get out, because they are hardened and just about nothing will extract them or drill into them where you can get a bite on them. In fact, in my experience, the best thing to do is to just take it to a machine shop at that point, and they can hopefully get an EDM machine and burn it out. But you can see all the rust that came out of that one, right? So the next step is to take some brake clean and of course clean that tap off, get all that nasty junk off of there that would have made it hard to thread stuff in. And then I spray it in here. Sorry, Nina, I got a little bit of that on you. And you can see the fluid will start to run clear. But so those threads are you know, reestablished, and the debris is now removed from the block. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is take some oil, and you can use whatever oil you have, really. It doesn't really matter. Again, we're not cutting threads here. This happens to be the old Zoom spout. A lot of the HVAC guys have these because you can reach that tube into the fans and stuff and squirrel cages on HVAC. I use it in the shop a lot just because it's a very convenient product to put on there. I'll put a link on the description for that. But I put a little bit of oil on the tap, and I just go back in and run it in each of these holes again. And what what I have now is some. Look how much easier that goes in. You know, it's these are clean. These are ready. When we assemble this engine again, it will be very, very easy to get bolts to thread in. We won't be fighting, you know, cross threading and things like that. And this will clean up any potential cross threads we run into. I haven't ran into any cross threading yet, which is a astounding feat on an old engine like this. But we will be sure not to be the first guys that cross thread a hole, because we're taking all this extra time to clean up every thread and every stud and everything we possibly can. So this is just a good practice to do. You know, when you're building engines, especially these old ones, get all these threads cleaned up and be ready for the installation and assembly of the engine, so you don't run into any of those problems. It makes it a much more enjoyable process when you are in final assembly. We've got one more in here that we're gonna run this tap in, and you can see how easy this tap is going in now that we have knocked all the rust off the threads and added a little bit of lube to the threads. But that lube is like I said, primarily there just to make sure that we don't get any rust on these nice new clean threads. And again, look how easy that's going in. These threads are all clean now and straight. So I'm going to continue on and do the rest of these. Of course, I'm not going to film that because that would be about like watching paint dry. But yeah, this is the process to clean up the threads on an engine when you are rebuilding it. The next video we will probably be installing freeze plugs. I just received the freeze plugs in the mail yesterday, and I know I'm calling them freeze plugs. I think, you know, a lot of people just call them core plugs, but these are the 5 plugs that go into the block that keep the water inside of the engine not leaking all out over the side. So we'll do a video of installing that, and then also the cam plug that goes in the back of the motor right here. There's a I'm sorry, it's hard to see, it's in here, but obviously, you know, most engines have a cam plug on the back right in that hole there. So we'll be installing the freeze plugs. There's one there. In our next video we'll be installing those freeze plugs as well as this cam plug. But again, just getting it ready for reassembly, and hopefully soon we'll be doing major reassembly with the camshaft and tappets and all that. So thanks guys.